First off, the football team is a losing team, and Kurt, as we find out, is a good kicker. But the reason he seems to be good at it is because he does a ritualistic, choreographed routine to Beyonce's Single Ladies before he kicks the football. After seeing this happen, Finn and the coach urge the team to follow Kurt's lead because this routine could be used to psych out the other team. After losing the first half of the game, the team finally goes through and does the entire Single Ladies dance, psyching out the other team and eventually winning the game, with the help of Kurt repeating his winning kick and fabulous Beyonce interpretation. Only through this process is the team able to win. It solidifies their masculine identity as sportsmen, but also shows that they have been queered in character by doing something that we probably wouldn't see any other football team do. Also, only through this process of the Beyonce football performance is Kurt able to come out to his father. White masculine identity is able to be diversified, and queer identity is able to come out publicly, as well as be recognized publicly. The images and stories taking place show that queerness can only recognize itself and be recognized as a prop or a diversifying tool in a larger canvas of white heterosexuality. Not only that, but Kurt's coming out story arc also implies that success and an acceptable social status, even if momentarily, is the only good time to come out. The processes of queering the quarterback and whitening the queer also serve another purpose in terms of representation. Now that several of the straight quarterbacks have been queered and deemed inferior, they are rejected by their dominant social status. They are deviant bodies in terms of adolescent power structures. I will shift my focus now to the other characters, quite literally, the other characters, in the show, and how the two plot lines and processes I have discussed in turn, re-other them. I'll be focusing on the character of Mercedes, who has been described by Reuters and the Associated Press as an overweight African-American girl. And that right there is part of the othering process that takes place in Glee when it comes to the minority characters. Throughout the show, Mercedes is referred to as Aretha and Effie by various white authority figures in the high school. If these markings of otherness and difference weren't enough, there's also the fact that Mercedes has yet to take center stage in an actual Glee performance. She's been confined to the role of backup to Finn and Rachel, the white vocal leads, as well as only being able to show her vocal prowess in rehearsals or in a fantasy format, such as when she performed Bust Your Windows. Now, don't get me wrong, Amber Riley, the actress who plays Mercedes, is definitely talented and has an extremely good voice, but as a character, she has been boxed into only expressing herself in the recurring image of a black woman done wrong who is now going to belt out a vengeful number. This is not to say that a powerful performance takes place or an entertaining one within the show, but let's disassociate our emotions for a minute from the power performances that fall into this category. First off, Mercedes' character is not coming from a project that is made by a black artist or producer. Ryan Murphy, the creator of the show, is in fact a gay white man. And also, like various other musicals, Glee follows suits with minorities taking the back seat in terms of stage time. The main plot lines all rotate around the white characters, especially the male characters like Kurt, Finn, or Mr. Schuster, but have yet to revolve around any of the woman characters on the show. I continue to see spaces where Mercedes could take center stage in a Glee performance, but it's continually ignored, and at one point in a recent episode, told that Rachel can handle the solo. Don't worry, we'll give you a song to dip in chocolate. In one episode, Throwdown, so Sue Sylvester, the evil, as they depict her, cheer coach, decides to sabotage the Glee Club by playing on suggested racial tensions. Now, I must note that the racial tensions are verbally expressed by white characters in the show as being suggested, but to me, they seem blatant. In particular, when Mercedes, again, suggests, can we do music that is more, well, black? And Rachel's character retorts back to Mercedes, show tunes are a staple in Glee Club. This isn't Crunk Club. Which then Mercedes then threatens to take her down. Sylvester then separates the group by having one group filled with quote-unquote minorities, including Mercedes, Kurt, the gay character, Tina, the other Asian character, Mike, and Artie, who is disabled, and while the other group is completely left full of white characters. Mercedes then sings Hate on Me by Jill Scott in the separate group rehearsal. Schuster hears about this and in response gives his group a song about love because, as he puts it, the other group is singing about hate, literally. This story arc is a clear statement on what is appropriate when a group is based on diversity. It's not appropriate to sing about hate, and it's definitely not appropriate when the so-called minority students are singing about it. never thinking that there is a reason why groups who center around identity politics that are based on supposed minority identities do have logical reasons to express anger over their marginalized status. This is a very unfair commentary on identity politics by the show, and is also a racist one. It is a common reaction of heterosexual whites and some queer white folks in these areas to talk about how angry a marginalized person of color is when they're expressing their dissatisfaction with the current systems of power. I'm going to make a brief connection to the bell hooks. In Wounds of Passion, Bell Hooks continually goes over and over again the frustrating process of publishing her first work, Ain't I a Woman? One of these frustrations comes from the fact that she's continually told that her analysis is so angry, it's so angry, too angry, as opposed to maybe stating that it's an insightful critique of hegemonic patriarchal white power. The refusal for dominant groups to recognize the material reasons of why so-called minority people critique dominant powers, they belittle the arguments made by such communities as being angry, and as in this case, too angry. Because in the age of neoliberalistic diversity, anger expressed at the group that still holds the most power, whiteness, and patriarchy, is not appropriate. This process re-others these characters, especially since the group is divided by a white character, and they are labeled minorities by this character. Also, they are re-othered in the sense that they are too angry. But it should be noted that in this minority group, there are two white characters, Kurt, who's gay, and Artie, the disabled student, or as Sylvester referred to him, Wheels. The students eventually become fed up by this plot, and they basically reunite. And of course, also, I believe the creators couldn't really keep a show running on a show about two divided groups, one being a dominant white group and one being a supposed minority group. But they reunite, and of course, Rachel and Finn still have the lead vocals, and Mercedes is still their backup singer, as is every other person in the show. Of course, there's an interesting scene that takes place between Schuster and Sue Sylvester. Schuster compliments Sue on the fact that she pointed out that these kids, or as he put it, those kids, are minorities. As if it wasn't plain to see, or even for 1 minute to think that the student body that he is teaching isn't monolithic. And at one point, he even states that he's glad that he can now recognize the differences, because in Glee Club, we are all minorities here. So as you can see, since they are all minorities, white hetero men, and of course now, the now pregnant Quinn Fabray, a white woman, they are minorities too in the Glee Club. And of course the Glee Club is titled New Directions. So, it's only through the process of straight characters being queered by the single ladies dance on the football field that these straight male characters are able to claim this minority stance. Whiteness and queerness in the show lead, as Gayatri Spivak writes in her piece, Can the Subaltern Speak, to the double colonization of raced bodies. And this is certainly present in the Glee Club. Glee Club is a site where minority students grow through this, but the Glee Club is also apparently the only space where certain characters that still hold privilege can erase their privilege and claim a stance of being marginalized. Despite these white characters now being minorities, they still have the most sway with Mr. Schuster, as well as the most plot lines, as well as the most screen time, etc., etc. But it's still a place for diverse minority bodies, and that is the new direction it's going in. But how do you explain a diversity that polices what is appropriate within the concept, or that white characters constantly are on screen, while the other characters are continually pushed to the background? But I'm sure they will have episodes dedicated to each character at one point, and each character will have its moment in Glee's spotlight. But it'll be a matter if the head white power in charge of the Glee Club will allow it. The show gives us a prime example of how race bodies in the show are re-othered by the process of queering straight male identity through the form of song and dance, and how at the same time this also whitens queer identity. This is not a positive embodiment of diversity. Queerness is merely a tool for this version of diversity, and basically allows people to claim a minority stance who honestly are not.